Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The morning light filtered through the cafe windows, like golden honey, casting warm shadows across the weathered wooden tables. Maya Chun had been working at the Corner Brew for 3 months now, and every single morning at exactly 7:23 a.m., he would walk through that door. She didn't know his name, and didn't know that this man would become the center of her entire universe in ways she never imagined possible. What she did know was that her heart would skip a beat every time she heard the familiar jingle of the entrance bell, followed by the soft sound of his leather shoes against the cafe's hardwood floor. She would look up from whatever she was doing, wiping down the espresso machine, arranging pastries, or counting the morning till, and there he would be, tall, with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, wearing perfectly pressed shirts that spoke of a life she couldn't even imagine. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and when they met hers across the counter, Maya felt something she'd never experienced before, a pull so strong it made her fingers tremble as she reached for his usual cup. "Good morning," he would say, his voice rich and warm like the coffee she served him. "The usual, please." And Maya would nod, unable to trust her voice, as she prepared his order with the kind of care usually reserved for sacred rituals. Medium roast, black, no sugar. Simple. Clean. Just like everything else about him seemed to be. But what happened next? What happened every single morning between them was anything but simple. Chapter 1. The ritual Maya's hands had memorized. The routine by now. The weight of the ceramic cup in her palm. The precise angle needed to pour the coffee without creating too much foam. The way she would slide it across the marble counter, with just enough force that it would stop perfectly in front of him. Never too close, never too far. She had learned to time it perfectly with his arrival. By 7:23, the coffee would be ready, still steaming, the rich aroma mixing with the vanilla candles that burned throughout the cafe. Maya had started lighting those candles specifically for him, though she would never admit it to anyone, not even to herself most days. "Thank you," he would say, his fingers brushing hers as he took the cup. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds, but Maya felt it like an electric current that traveled from her fingertips straight to her heart. She wondered if he felt it too, or if she was just a 19-year-old girl with an overactive imagination and a dangerous crush on a man who probably didn't even know her name. But then there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when she caught him looking at her with something that seemed deeper than casual politeness. When his eyes would linger on her face just a heartbeat longer than necessary. When he would pause before leaving, as if he wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words. Maya had been working since she was 16, saving every penny for college. Her parents had immigrated from Taiwan when she was 5, and they ran a small alterations shop 3 blocks away. They worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, and Maya had learned early that dreams were luxuries that had to be earned through sacrifice and determination. The cafe job was supposed to be temporary, just until she saved enough for her first semester at the state university. She wanted to study literature, to lose herself in stories, and maybe even write her own someday. But as the weeks passed, she found herself looking forward to work in a way that had nothing to do with the paycheck and everything to do with him. Had named him Mr. Coffee in her mind, though she knew it was silly. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom or a luxury car commercial, not in her small-town cafe with its mismatched furniture and handwritten specials board. Everything about him spoke of success and sophistication, from his expensive watch to the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. Maya, on the other hand, felt like she was still figuring out who she was supposed to be. At 19, she was caught between the dutiful daughter her parents expected and the independent woman she was trying to become. She wore her long black hair in a simple ponytail during work. No makeup except for the chapstick she applied nervously. Whenever she saw him coming through the door, the age difference should have felt insurmountable. Should have made her feel foolish for the way her pulse quickened whenever he smiled at her. But somehow, in those brief morning moments, none of that seemed to matter. There was something in his eyes that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. Chapter 2. The question 3 weeks into what Maya had started thinking of as their routine. Everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, grey and drizzly. The kind of weather that made the cafe feel like a warm refuge from the world outside. Maya had arrived early, as she always did, and had just finished arranging the morning pastries when she heard the familiar jingle of the entrance. Bell, 7:23 a.m. Right on schedule. But something was different. Instead of heading straight to the counter, he paused just inside the door, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. Maya noticed he looked tired, as if he hadn't slept well, and there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Good morning," she said softly, already reaching for his usual cup. "Medium roast, black?" He approached the counter slowly, his storm-cloud eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Actually," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I was wondering if I could ask you something." Maya's heart began to race. In all the weeks he'd been coming in, their conversations had never extended beyond pleasantries and coffee orders. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "What's your name?" he asked, and the simple question hit her like a revelation. "I've been coming here for weeks, and I realized I don't even know your name." "Maya," she whispered, surprised by how intimate it felt to share this basic piece of information with him. "Maya Chen." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features completely. "Maya," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "I'm David. David Morrison." The name suited him perfectly. Strong, classic, professional. Maya found herself smiling back, feeling suddenly shy under his gaze. "It's nice to finally meet you properly, Maya," David continued, accepting his coffee cup from her hands. But instead of leaving immediately, as he always did, he stayed. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you a student? You seem too bright to be working in a cafe permanently." The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her about her dreams before, not customers, anyway. "I'm saving for college," she heard herself say. "I want to study literature." David's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Literature? That's wonderful. What kind of writing draws you in?" And suddenly, Maya found herself talking, really talking, about her love for stories that captured the complexity of human emotion, about authors who could make her cry with just a few perfectly chosen words, about her secret dream of maybe writing something meaningful herself someday. David listened with the kind of attention that made her feel like her words mattered. He asked thoughtful questions, shared his own favorite books, and when Maya mentioned her particular love for poetry, he quoted a line from Neruda that made her heart flutter. "The heart's memory eliminates the bad and magnifies the good." He sighed, his voice soft and contemplative. "I've always found that to be both beautiful and terrifying." Maya stared at him amazed. Here was this successful, sophisticated man, and he was quoting poetry to her in a small-town cafe at 7:30 in the morning. It felt like something out of one of the novels she loved to read. "I should let you get back to work," David said eventually, glancing around the cafe, which was starting to fill with the morning rush. "But Maya?" He paused, his eyes finding hers again. "I'd love to continue this conversation sometime, if you'd like that too." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "I like that very much." David smiled, That same warm smile that had been haunting her dreams. Until tomorrow, then. As he walked toward the door, Maya realized that everything had just changed. Their careful routine of polite distance had been shattered by something much more dangerous. Possibility. The next morning, Maya arrived at work 30 minutes early. Her stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of their conversation, analyzing every word, every look, every pause. Part of her was terrified that yesterday had been a dream, that David would return to his usual polite distance, and she would be left feeling foolish for having hoped for something more. But when the entrance bell chimed, at exactly 7:23 a.m., and David walked through the door with that same tired but determined expression, Maya knew that something fundamental had shifted between them. "Good morning, Maya," he said, and the way he spoke her name sent warmth flooding through her chest. "Good morning, David," she replied, surprised by how natural it felt to use his name. As she prepared his coffee, Maya was acutely aware of David watching her every movement. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with a kind of gentle attention that made her feel precious, important. "I have a confession to make," David said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya's hands stilled on the coffee cup. "What kind of confession?" David looked around the cafe, ensuring they were alone, then leaned slightly across the counter. "I don't actually need coffee this early in the morning. I'm usually not even awake before 8. Maya blinked, confused. "Then why do you come here every day?" A flush crept up David's neck, and suddenly he looked younger, more vulnerable. "Because of you," he said simply. "I started coming here because the coffee was good, but I kept coming back because ... because seeing you became the best part of my day." The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge that could either connect them or collapse under the weight of its implications. Maya felt her world tilt on its axis. Here was this incredible man, successful and sophisticated, and everything she'd ever dreamed of, telling her that she was the reason he restructured his entire morning routine. "David," she breathed, not sure what she was trying to say. "I know this is complicated," he continued, his voice urgent now, as if he needed to get all the words out before he lost his courage. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense, but Maya, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop wondering what it would be like to really know you, to hear all your thoughts about literature and life and everything in between." Maya's heart was racing so fast, she was sure he could hear it. "I think about you too," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Every night, every morning. I light those vanilla candles because I noticed you seem to like the smell." David's eyes widened, and suddenly he was smiling that brilliant smile again. "You light them for me. I do a lot of things for you," Maya confessed, feeling brave and terrified all at once. "I get here early to make sure your coffee is perfect. I memorized your schedule. I even started reading the business section of the newspaper because I thought it might give us something to talk about." "Maya," David said, his voice thick with emotion, "do you have any idea how extraordinary you are?" Before she could respond, the morning rush began in earnest. The cafe filled with customers, and Maya was forced to turn her attention to other orders, other conversations. But throughout the busy morning, she was hyper-aware of David's presence. He had taken a seat at the corner table, something he'd never done before, and was working on his laptop while stealing glances at her every time their eyes met. Maya felt that same electric connection, that sense of possibility that made her feel like she was living inside one of her favorite novels. But she also felt the weight of reality pressing down on her. David was clearly successful, established, probably in his mid-40s. She was 19, working in a cafe, still figuring out her life. What could they possibly have in common beyond These stolen moments and shared glances. Chapter 4. The revelation as the morning rush finally subsided, Maya found herself alone with David again. The cafe had emptied except for an elderly woman reading in the corner, and a college student typing furiously on his laptop. David approached the counter, his expression serious. "Maya, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, wiping down the counter with hands that trembled slightly. "How old are you?" he asked quietly. Maya's heart sank. She had been dreading this question, knowing it would change everything. "I'm 19, she said, unable to meet his eyes. David was quiet for a long moment, and Maya prepared herself for the inevitable retreat, the polite distance that would return to replace this brief, beautiful connection they'd shared. "I'm 45, he said finally. Maya looked up at him, surprised by the sadness in his voice. "I know," she said softly. I guessed. "Does it matter?" "It should matter," David said, running a hand through his hair. "Maya, I'm old enough to be your father. I have a career, a mortgage, a life that's completely different from yours. You're just starting out. You have college ahead of you, adventures, discoveries. I shouldn't be here, feeling this way about you." "But you are here," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "And I'm here too. And David, I may be 19, but I'm not a child. I know what I feel." David's eyes searched her face as if trying to memorize every detail. "What do you feel, Maya?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her answer would change everything. "I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for you to walk through that door," she said, her voice steady despite the way her heart was hammering. "I feel like every book I've ever read, every story I've ever loved, was preparing me to understand what this is. This connection. This ... feeling." David closed his eyes briefly as if her words caused him physical pain. "Maya, you have no idea what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," she replied firmly. "I know that age is just a number, but experience and wisdom and kindness, those are the things that matter. I know that you're the first person who's ever asked me about my dreams and actually listened to the answer. I know that when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I've never felt before. And I know," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "that whatever this is between us, it's real. It's not some silly crush or infatuation. It's something deeper, something that scares me and excites me, and makes me feel more alive than I've ever felt." David opened his eyes and looked at her with such intensity that Maya felt like he could see straight through to her soul. "Maya, I could lose everything. My career, my reputation. People would never understand. Do you care more about what people think than about what you feel?" Maya asked, surprising herself with her boldness. David was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. Finally, he spoke. "I care about you," he said simply. "More than I should. More than is probably wise. Maya, you are the most incredible woman I've ever met. Your age doesn't change that, but it does complicate things in ways you might not fully understand yet." "Then help me understand," Maya said, leaning across the counter slightly. "Don't make decisions for me, David. Talk to me. Trust me." David studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, "but not here, not like this. Maya, would you have dinner with me? Somewhere we can actually talk without interruption." Maya's heart soared. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I would love that." "Tomorrow night?" David asked. "I know a quiet place about 20 minutes outside of town. Somewhere we can be ourselves without worrying about who might see us." The implication of his words that they needed to hide, to be careful, sent a thrill of excitement and apprehension through Maya. This was really happening. She was going to have dinner with David Morrison, the man who had become the center of her entire world without even trying. Tomorrow night, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. David smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it reached his eyes completely. I'll pick you up at 7. Maya nodded, then realized she needed to give him her address. As she wrote it on a napkin, her hand shaking slightly, she couldn't help but think that she was crossing a line she could never uncross. Tomorrow night, everything would change. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite all the logical reasons why this was complicated and difficult and potentially heartbreaking, Maya couldn't wait. Maya changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that her mother had bought her for her high school graduation. It was elegant without being too formal, sophisticated without trying too hard. She had spent an hour on her hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders, and applied just enough makeup to feel confident, without looking like she was trying to appear older than she was. At exactly 7 o'clock, she heard a car pull up outside her apartment building. Maya's heart hammered as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to check her reflection one more time in the hallway mirror. David was leaning against a sleek black sedan, dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt that made his eyes look even more striking. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made all her nervousness evaporate. "You look beautiful," he said softly, opening the passenger door for her. "Thank you," Maya replied, feeling suddenly shy again. "You look pretty amazing yourself." The drive to the restaurant was filled with comfortable conversation about books and music, and the changing seasons. David had chosen a small Italian place in the next town over, intimate and dimly lit, with candles flickering on every table and soft jazz playing in the background. As they settled into a corner booth, Maya was struck by how natural this felt. Despite the age difference, despite the complications, sitting across from David felt like coming home. "Tell me about your family," David said after they'd ordered wine-sparkling cider for Maya, who wasn't old enough to drink legally yet. Maya talked about her parents, their struggles as immigrants, their hopes for her future. She found herself sharing stories she'd never told anyone, about the pressure she felt to succeed, about her dreams of writing, about the way she sometimes felt caught between 2 worlds. "They want me to study something practical," she said, twirling her pasta around her fork. "Business or accounting. Something that will guarantee a good job. They can't understand why I want to study literature when it probably won't lead to a stable career." David nodded thoughtfully. "My parents were the same way. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. I compromised and went into business, but I've always regretted not following my first instinct." "Which was?" "Teaching," David said, his eyes growing distant. "I wanted to teach high school English. I wanted to be the teacher who showed kids that books weren't just assignments, but doorways to understanding themselves and the world around them." Maya stared at him, amazed. "That's exactly what I want to do. I mean, I want to write too. But I've always thought teaching would be the perfect way to share that love of literature." "See?" David said, reaching across the table to touch her hand gently. "We're not so different. You and I, we just took different paths to get to the same place." The contact sent electricity through Maya's entire system. His hand was warm and strong, and she found herself studying the way his fingers looked against hers, long and elegant, with the simple silver ring on his right hand. "David," she said softly, "tell me about your life. Your real life. I want to know everything." David's expression grew more serious. "I run a consulting firm. Business development mostly. I help companies restructure and grow. It's successful, lucrative, but double quotes. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. It's also empty. I go to work. I come home to an empty house. I travel for business. I haven't been truly happy in years. No family? Maya asked gently. I was married, David said, his voice growing quiet. For 8 years. Sarah was a good woman, but we wanted different things. She wanted children, a traditional family life. I was so focused on building my career that I kept putting it off, saying we'd have kids later, when things were more stable. By the time I realized what I was losing, it was too late. Maya felt a pang of sympathy for him. I'm sorry. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago, David continued. Since then, I've been going through the motions. Work, gym, sleep, repeat. Until 3 months ago, when I walked into a little cafe and saw this extraordinary girl with the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen. Maya's breath caught. David. I know this is crazy, he said, his voice urgent now. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense. But Maya, you've woken something up in me that I thought was dead. You make me want to be better, to take risks, to actually live instead of just existing. Maya turned her hand over so that their palms were touching, their fingers intertwined. You do the same thing for me, she said softly. You make me feel like I'm worth listening to, like my thoughts and dreams matter. You make me feel beautiful and smart and capable of anything. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, their hands clasped across the table, the weight of their confession settling between them. So where do we go from here? Maya asked finally. David's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. I don't. No, he admitted. This is uncharted territory for me. But Maya, I want to find out. If you're willing to take this risk with me, I want to see where this goes. Maya looked into his storm cloud eyes and saw her own feelings reflected back at her. The wonder, the fear, the hope, the certainty that this was something worth fighting for. I'm willing, she said, her voice steady and sure. Whatever comes. Next, I want to face it with you. David brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. And we'll figure it out together. As they left the restaurant that night, Maya felt like she was walking into a completely new life. The girl who had gone to work that morning was gone, replaced by a woman who was brave enough to reach for something extraordinary. Regardless of the obstacles, the future was uncertain, complicated, and potentially heartbreaking. But for the first time in her life, Maya felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Epilogue. 6 months later, the cafe looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed. Maya still worked the morning shift, still lit the vanilla candles, still prepared coffee with the same careful attention to detail. But now, when David walked through the door at 7:23 a.m., her heart soared not with nervous anticipation, but with the deep, settled joy of a woman who was truly loved. Their relationship had been everything she'd imagined and more. David had been patient with her inexperience, gentle with her fears, and endlessly supportive of her dreams. He had encouraged her to apply to the state university, had helped her with scholarship applications, had even offered to help with tuition if she needed it. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything, he had said when she'd protested. I want you to pursue your dreams because they matter. Because you matter. And Maya, investing in your future is the best investment I could ever make. They had faced challenges, of course. Curious looks from people who noticed the age difference. Disapproving comments from strangers who didn't understand their connection. Maya's parents had been skeptical at first, but David's genuine respect for their daughter and his obvious devotion to her had eventually won them over. He looks at you like you're the son, Her mother had said one evening after David had joined them for dinner. "That's how your father still looks at me after 30 years. Now, as Maya prepared David's usual coffee, she smiled at the memory. In a few months, she would start college, but instead of feeling like she was leaving her old life behind, she felt like she was building on the foundation they had created together. David approached the counter, as he had every morning for the past 9 months, but instead of ordering his usual coffee, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maya's breath caught as David dropped to one knee right there in the cafe, in front of the espresso machine where they'd first learned each other's names. "Maya-chan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You turned my life upside down in the most beautiful way possible. You taught me that love doesn't follow rules or timelines or social expectations. You taught me that the heart knows what it wants, regardless of age or circumstance or what anyone else thinks." Maya's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "I know we're young in this relationship," David continued, "but I also know that what we have is real and rare and worth everything. Will you marry me? Or you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how extraordinary you are?" Through her tears, Maya could see the other customers in the cafe stopping to watch, could hear someone whisper, "Oh my God, is this really happening?" But all of that faded into background noise as she looked into David's eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." As David slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, Maya realized that fairy tales weren't just stories in books. Sometimes, if you were brave enough to believe in magic, if you were willing to take risks and face uncertainty, and trust in something bigger than yourself, real life could be even more beautiful than any story ever written. The cafe erupted in applause, and Maya laughed through her tears as David spun her around, both of them grinning like teenagers who had just discovered that love was real, and it was theirs, and it was forever. At 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, surrounded by the scent of vanilla candles and fresh coffee, Maya-chan accepted a proposal that would change her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. And she had never been more ready for anything in her entire life. Outside, the sun was rising on a new day, and Maya knew that whatever came next, she would face it with the man who had shown her that love was worth every risk, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty. Their story was just beginning.